Hey guys, welcome to the Driveline channel. Today I'm going to be talking about BC Racing coilovers for the C6 Corvette platform. I'm in my C6 Z06 and we're going to go for a ride and talk about the BC Racing coilovers. Okay guys, so we are going to go and head out and go for a little bit of a drive. The camera is mounted to the windshield. Also have an external microphone going on. So hopefully this will give you kind of a insight into how the car rides, from the bounciness and kind of the undulations in the road, how the car reacts to that as well too. So try to pay attention to that throughout the video. Okay, so on my Corvette C6 Z06, what am I running? I'm running the Digressive Series DS coilovers from BC Racing on my Corvette. Okay, so why did I choose the Digressive over the linear version of the coilovers? Well, in my experience using KWs and Bilsteins, etc., you know, for street driving, a Digressive shock is a little bit better around town than a linear shock is, for that matter. So just briefly, what's the difference between a Digressive and a linear shock? Because the price difference is, you know, it's substantial to that matter. Because you look at the regular linear shock from BC Racing and you're looking at $995. For the Digressive series or the DS, you're looking at around $1,300, $1,350, somewhere around there. So it's quite a substantial price jump. Okay, so what's the difference between the two? What's up, man?
You're smokers. That thing is sick.
Thank you.
Yeah, baby, that is sick.
Thanks, man.
Oh, man. What year is it?
It's 2008. Thanks, man. It's always nice when people go and admire the car. You know, driving around, I always get attention from this car too. So, you know, what can I say? You know, you either love it or you love it. So, yeah. Okay, so back to what I was talking about. So, the damping rate at low velocities is going to be substantially higher for a Digressive shock, whereas the linear is, well, it's linear. Basically, the faster you go, the faster your wheel is moving up and down, the more damping control or damping is going to happen. That's why when you look at the linear, it's a linear rate. Whereas you look at the Digressive, it goes up and then it tapers off. You know, it kind of just flatlines, for that matter. Okay, so why does that matter? Well, it matters because at slow speeds, you want as much control as you can get, because that's where a vast majority of us are going to be driving. You know, you want that control over the bumps. So you see, I'm going over quite a ripply asphalt surface. Okay, so with that, that's probably the main reason why I chose the Digressive shock over the linear one. In my experience, the linear shock from BC Racing, I've installed in a few cars, they're just complete trash. To me, they are just not any good for ride quality. They're not any good for, you know, hard driving or anything like that. Are they an upgrade over stock? Yeah, they are, for the most part. But you're going to have a substantially, you know, bumpier, rougher ride. You have to remember that coilovers utilize most of the time a linear spring, so that means that you have one set spring rate on your coilover. Okay, so with that out of the way, you know, BC Racing Digressive shocks and the coilover system for the Corvette. Do I recommend it? You know, this is a hard one for me. Okay, I've run into some issues with mine. Okay, so one of the reliability issues that I had with the BC Racing coilover was this shock mount. So what is the shock mount? Well, it's a monoball mount on the upper shock. I had this go out in the first 200 miles of installation. So I was driving the car and the rattle started getting more and more pronounced after 200 miles. Basically what happened is that the monoball inside the cup, somehow it just wasn't seated correctly at the factory. So when the wheel would go up into the wheel well, you know, you had the shock stroke going on. Basically this would be clanking around because there was play up and down on this monoball. I tried to get in contact with BC Racing about this to try and warranty it, gave them all the receipts from where I bought it, and I thought that the product warranty would be okay, but for whatever reason I just never really got an answer from them. I sent them all the receipts, all the stuff that they asked for, and they just never got back to me afterwards. So really didn't like that about BC Racing, but I digress. These are just things of huge companies, I guess. You know, what can you do? Okay, so what are the pros, what are the cons of running a BC Racing coilover from my perspective? I've tried BC Racing linear and digressive now. So linear BC Racing, to me, I just refuse to run them. I really don't, oh, see, that was a pretty big bump. I really don't like the way that they ride. They are just awful at low speeds. They are so mushy, and the springs just, there is no control with the damping at low speeds. Honestly, you know, you're going below 10 miles an hour, you know, and you go on really rough pavement, you know, the bounce is just immense. You know, you can rocket the rebound all the way up. And that's another thing that we need to talk about too with BC Racing coilovers, is rebound and compression. This is the worst trade-off for BC Racing coilovers. You have compression bleed over into the damping control. So what does that mean? It basically means as the wheel compresses, as goes up, you know, there's a certain amount of shock resistance that you want for that compression stroke. On the rebound stroke is the body control portion of it. You know, I'm just trying to simplify this, so, you know, there's a lot more that goes into that. But the rebound control is going to be how the body moves, you know. Not enough rebound, the body feels like it's jumping out of the chassis. Too much of it, it feels like it's just packing and packing down, you know, and the ride will go like, you know, really bad, you know. So to me, that's pretty important, to say the least. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, for me, it meant that I can't dial in the rebound or the compression. What do you expect for a single adjustable? Well, that's what you're going to expect, you know. There are certain trade-offs, especially at this price point, okay? But what does that mean for the Corvette? Well, it meant that I can't get the rear end of the car dialed in. There is just not enough rebound, and once I start getting enough rebound, there's so much compression on the rear from the bleed over that it just makes the car ride so atrociously. You know, and it makes it feel like the car wants to just jump out because there's so much compression, you know. And I've tried for months, you know, trying all kinds of different settings, etc. But the main fix that I found for these coilovers was replacing the springs that come with the BC Racing coilovers. You know, they're okay quality, but there's a lot to be desired. So I switched over to 62 millimeter Swift springs. I ran the same 6 kilogram front spring rate, so that's about 392 pounds. And in the rear, I decided to soften it up because I didn't think that there was enough shock control in the rear of the car, which is rather unfortunate. Because of that, I just ran with a slightly softer Swift spring in the rear. Swiss springs are amazing springs in my opinion. I've run them on every single one of my cars. I've run Eibach and I've run Hypercode. They're both great as well. I just like Swiss springs. I guess that's just my preference. Okay, so just cruising around. The car is it's not bouncy. It feels pretty good. It is a little bit rough because it is pretty stiff for the most part. But the car feels very controlled. We're going about 30 miles an hour through, town. It's a pretty smooth pavement, but, you could probably kind of see in the video that there are some little bumpy, rough spots. Can't complain. I daily drive this car. Ride quality is pretty important to me, but this is by no means, bad. It's totally bearable. Is it different than stock? Yeah, it's totally different than stock. The car is way more planted and a lot more rough, to say the least. To me, it's less bouncy as well. Are coilovers a dire modification on a Corvette or any car for that matter? You don't know. As I'm getting older, I've put coilovers on every single one of my cars. I have to say, coilovers are not the most important modification that you need to do on your car. I think there are plenty of good shock combinations to go on Corvettes and other cars too that run struts. I had H&Rs on my BMW before on the stock shocks, and they were fantastic. I loved the car. I loved the way the car rode. It was very much just a little bit more sporty. It was a little bit stiffer. The car had great body control. The car was totally flickable. On the higher speed stuff, it was a little bit more questionable on the rebound, but that's to be expected on a stock car. So we'll give the car a little bit of whelly. Nice sweeping bend. Feels great. Car is planted, not bouncing around. Car feels very safe. The motion of the car is very good too. There's enough squat in the car, where it doesn't feel like it's bottoming out, and it doesn't feel like it's packing down either. So that's always a nice thing to have. Okay, now we'll pick up the pace a little bit. Car feels nice and planted. Feeling really good. This easy driving, through the twisties is really where these BC Racing coilovers feel the best. If you're really maxing them out, going real quick, they really don't feel like they're up to par. But 6-7/10 driving, they feel great. Dab our brakes. Power on. Get a little trail braking going. Feeling pretty good. There we go. Out of the corner. There's nothing like torque out of the corner though. Okay guys, it is insanely hot. It's still 102 outside, so I am cooking. Please go ahead and shoot me a like, shoot me a comment. What do you want to know about these coilovers? Is there anything more that I can add that you guys might be curious about? If you can, just go ahead and drop a comment, drop a like, go ahead and subscribe, because there will be more Corvette content coming at you. So thanks for watching the Driveline channel.